They warned me the Ice King devours his brides. They were wrong. The road to Thornfell was a vein of black ribbon laid across a moor that seemed to breathe. Mist rose in slow exhalations from the peat, licked the coach lamps, and smeared the light into pale halos that followed like ghostly attendants. Lenora Vale tucked the corner of a letter back into its blue envelope, the paper softened by many readings. For the attention of Miss Lenora Vale, St. Isolde's orphan home. It promised a patron, a marriage, a manor by the sea. It said words like charity and protection and future. It did not say wolves. Something yowled far off, so far the sound arrived thin and warped as if it had crossed a century to reach her. The driver's shoulders hunched against it. "Wind!" he called through the trap. But rain had not yet come, and the night was clear enough to make a liar of him. Lenora pressed her palm to the window. The glass was cold enough to sting. Out there, the moor rolled in hummocks and black pools that held the sky. She caught a flicker of motion, massive, low to the ground, keeping pace with the coach as though the night itself had loped alongside. When she looked straight at it, there was nothing but fog. When she looked away, it reappeared at the edge of sight, a blot of deeper shadow amid the moving gray. "You've ridden this way before?" she asked, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "First and last time, miss," the driver said, and then added too quickly, "First, I mean." The coach crested a rise. Thornfell spilled into view, a cliff-perched citadel of black stone blasted into angles by the sea wind, its windows bloodlit by a dying sun that lived nowhere else in the sky. The house seemed to lean forward as if it had been listening for her and had finally heard. A retainer swung the gate open, with a sound like a sword leaving a scabbard. The coach passed the iron, and Lenora's skin prickled where the bars were close enough to touch, as though she had brushed a nettle. The door opened before she could knock. A woman stood framed in the threshold, the buttery sheen of the lamp painting her stern, capable face. "Agnes Hart," she said, "housekeeper." Her eyes scanned Lenora like a ledger. "Coat off, boots there. Do not stray the eastern wing. Do not open windows after sunset. If you hear howling, count to 60 before you light a candle." "You count?" Lenora asked. "It is a foolish superstition, and all of us keep it," Agnes said briskly. "The master dines in the library. You look half-starved. This way." A procession of banisters and carpeting swallowed Lenora. Thornfell was a geography of paintings and pauses. Armored men haunted its corners. A piano waited with its lid raised like an astonished mouth. The sea pushed its voice against the cliff and was answered by a low house moan, the sound old timbers make when they remember they were once trees. The air was tinctured with frankincense and a resinous scent that suggested pine forests and coin-bright winter stars. They entered the library. Fire carried its own weather here, a hearthstorm that turned glass into gold. Books rose in 1,000 leather spines. A hound made of shadow lifted its head from a rug and decided Lenora was uninteresting. A man stood with one arm braced on the mantel, his posture both at ease and ready, as if he could walk into his own portrait and hang himself there between his ancestors. "Lord Allaric Grey," Agnes announced. The man turned. There was nothing prim or Victorian about his beauty. It was a wild country thing made presentable by effort, cheekbones like cliffs, a mouth that had practiced restraint, eyes a winter forest gray that might pass for gentle until night fell. A scar bisected his left eyebrow, the faintest silvering like the seam in old china. "Miss Vale," he said, and his voice worked in her the way a bell works in a flock, the quiet itself rearranged. "Welcome to Thornfell." "Thank you, my lord." She tried to curtsy and nearly knocked a table with her skirt. "That is unnecessary," he said, the ghost of humor there and gone. "Sit, eat, Agnes, the soup." She obeyed. The spoon shook once in her hand and then learned her again. Allaric watched her with attention so precise it felt like respect, not hunger. He asked nothing of her until the bowl was empty and Agnes had placed a plate where steam made little banners from the meat. "You received my letter," he said. "I did. And you come willingly?" "As willingly as a person who has never had anyone want her might come," Lenora said. "I am curious who you think I am." It should have been too bold. His mouth softened, almost a smile. "Honest. That will be difficult for this house, but fortunate for me." His gaze flicked toward the far shelves where a portrait loomed. Lenora followed it. A woman in black regarded the room from that canvas as if it had failed to meet standards and would continue to do so until it improved. Her hair was a spill of raven, her jewelry a cold constellation that stung the eye. "My mother," Allaric said, not looking at the painting. "Lady Sable Grey. She is no longer with us." "Was she often with anyone?" Agnes muttered, so quietly that only the fire heard. Lenora pretended not to. Allaric set a small velvet box on the table and slid it toward Lenora. "You have been offered much without explanation. Thornfell has old obligations. The patronage of St. Isolde's is one of them. Every few years a girl is chosen who—" He paused, and the pause had weight. "Who bears a certain mark. Your mother left you a locket. May I see it?" Lenora's fingers moved before her caution. She unclasped the little oval, and the chain made a swift snake of gold across her palm. Inside, where other people kept faces, her locket held a pressed sprig of something gray-green and brittle, its shape still elegant, though years had dried it into paper. "Wolfsbane," Allaric said softly. "Aconitum, a plant that keeps its promises." The corner of his mouth lifted. "So do you. In that, I am fortunate." "Why would my mother keep wolfsbane near my heart?" "Because she loved you and because she knew the world," he said simply. "Thornfell is complicated. There are threats we cannot name to those outside the house. There are debts we cannot forgive inside it. This marriage protects you from both." Marriage. The word fell into the room and found a place there like furniture that had always belonged. Lenora felt absurdly calm. She was 20 and had no dowry and had learned to harvest humility rather than heartbreak. If a lord from a cliff house wanted a wife who knew how to fold a sheet and mend a soul, she could be that. If his library held answers to questions she'd carried since she was old enough to read in the dark, she could be that too. "You give me more choice than I expected," she said. He inclined his head. "A woman who marries me will need her will like a sword. I would see it honed, not stolen." That night, Lenora's room wore its age like perfume. The bed was an architecture of linen and dusk. The window showed her a slice of sea and a pin of moon. She meant to sleep, but the house had other ideas. Somewhere to the east, a piano toyed with a melody, just the right hand, just above a whisper. "Darling, hush, the night is teeth." It was almost a lullaby. She drifted, thinking of mothers who pressed poisons into lockets and of men whose voices came in winter. A low sound, not music, brought her bolt awake. A scrape like claws testing stone. Then nothing. Then the sound again, closer. She got out of bed, feeling foolish even as her feet found slippers. She counted, because Agnes had told her to, and the superstition had already installed itself in her, 1 to 60, the number making a simple fence around her heart. At 60, she lit a candle. The little round light unpeeled the dark in layers. She crossed to the window. Something looked back. 2 gray eyes hung at the height of a man's face. The rest of it was shadow, broad, furred, outlined in breath that smoked the cold glass. It was not an apparition. Breath was proof. Lenora made a small sound that struck the window and fell. The eyes blinked, slow, almost sleepy. A paw, huge, splay-toed, rose as if in a parody of human courtliness and touched the pane. The candle guttered. When she looked again, the night was a night again. Lenora stood with her pulse everywhere and her hand still lifted. and wondered if she had imagined a visitor and then complicity with it. Morning was clean and light, as if it had never met a wolf. Agnes brought eggs and news. "You will be fitted this afternoon," she said. "Do not wear white. Thornfell observes without observing, but we do not tempt our luck." "What is white to luck?" Lenora asked. "An invitation," Agnes said, and left. The seamstress had a mouthful of pins and opinions to match. Lenora stood while fabric became a suggestion of a dress. It was smoke blue, needle-stippled at the bodice, with blackwork thorns wreathed by the tiniest roses. "You've a shape for finer things than Charity was made to recognize," the seamstress said around her pins. "Hold still." Allaric did not appear that day. Thornfell did. Lenora learned its stair that creaked, and the other stair that did not. She learned the way the conservatory kept summer even in October, how lemons perfumed a corner of air and the bees argued gently with the glass. She met the staff, a cook who swore in French when she dropped things, a gardener who rolled his R's like pebbles, a stable boy with hair the color of a sandstorm and a grin to match. Toward evening, the fog came back to the moor as though night grew from the ground rather than fell from the sky. Lenora took a book from the library's lower shelves because the upper shelves felt like altitudes. She found a window seat and climbed into it. The sea flexed its muscle against the cliff and settled again. "Miss Vale." Allaric's voice always seemed to find her before the rest of him did. She turned, and there he was, coat off, shirt sleeves rolled. He looked less like an engraving and more like a person. "You found my favorite window. I apologize," she said gravely. "I will prefer your second favorite in future." "Don't you dare," he said. So quick the words came on a breath. Then, lower, "Please stay." So she did. They read in companionable silence until reading became not reading. And then they spoke about nothing that mattered until nothing turned into everything. Lenora told him about St. Isolde's, the squeak of chalk on slate, the way winter came into the dormitory like a gentleman, quietly and everywhere, the taste of soup on Christmas. He told her about riding the boundary wall at dawn, a ritual he could not break, about finding a rook with a broken wing and learning from it the patience to wait for healing that came in tiny, stubborn increments. "Do you always smell like pine and smoke?" she blurted, horrified at herself and then committed because she had said it. He didn't laugh. "Only when I've been myself," he said. "And when you are not?" "A better actor," he said, and the line between his brows deepened as if the thought pained him. The house went still then. Not quiet, still, as when prey hears a twig break in a nearby wood. The hound that had decided Lenora was uninteresting stood and lifted its muzzle. One of the lamps, almost imperceptibly dimmed, recovered. Allaric set his book down. "Agnes will have locked the east wing?" he asked, and when Lenora nodded, he said, "Good. What is it?" "Wind," he said, as the driver had said it, and then he was across the room in a few political strides that wasted no movement. "If I ask you to go upstairs and bolt your door, will you promise to do it? Not to look, not to save anyone, not to ask anything of the dark except to leave." His eyes were winter forest and something else too, the color of a sky right before it breaks. "Yes," she said, and did not know until then that it was true. He was already moving, already a different story in a human frame. She ran. Her shoes beat a code into the runner. Upstairs, bolt. She stood with her ear against the door like a child and listened. The house uncoiled. There is a sound certain animals make when they are not pretending. It is ancient, it is rude, it does not belong to parlors. That sound raked the night. It was answered by a chorus of smaller ferocities. Something hit the door. Dust shook loose from a century of beams. She counted. 1 to 60. At 30, she realized she was praying, though to what she could not say. At 60, she did not light a candle. The hallway flared with sudden witch-bright light and went dark again. The thing beyond her door snuffled the threshold in a way that was horrifying only because it was so ordinary, like a dog learning a friend by scent. Then claws ticked away on stone. Silence came down in pieces. When morning prized the night up with a butter knife, Agnes opened Lenora's door with a skeleton key and a frown that couldn't decide whether to scold or embrace. "You kept your promise," she said. "Good girl." "What was it?" Lenora asked, and when Agnes didn't answer, "What are we?" Agnes's hand was warm and rough with a lifetime of work. She cupped Lenora's cheek and then patted it briskly, a gesture that both mother and soldier might recognize. "Breakfast," she said. "The rest is none of our business, which is to say it is all our business, which is to say we will not speak of it until the master does." Allaric did speak of it. Not then, not over breakfast, where a streak of dried blood showed on his cuff like ink. Not even when Lenora stared at that mark until he tugged the sleeve over it. He walked the cliff path with her instead and taught her the way the wind would try to steal her balance there, how to lean into it without letting it take more than she meant to give. "You could have left," he said finally, when the house was a toy behind them and the horizon a blade. "Could I?" Lenora said. "What would I go back to? A bed I share with 3 girls? A bowl of soup and a kiss on the head from a woman whose hands hurt? I think I would rather learn to count to 60. He looked at her a long time. "I would rather you learn to count to 20 and then ran to me," he said, and surprised them both with the admission. She almost reached for his hand. She did not. The wind made a clever braid of her hair and set it free again. Days passed with a new carefulness. The eastern wing stayed locked, and Agnes kept keys like a priestess. Lenora's dress took shape under the seamstress's irritated needle. Allaric was kind in a manner that could not be taught. He put his body between hers and danger without ceremony. He left books where she would find them on subjects she had not known to want. He did not touch her except with his eyes, and those touches landed like warmth after winter. Night had teeth. Twice more sounds came that belonged to landscapes without houses. Once a pane shattered somewhere, and the servants moved like chess pieces, swift, silent, each to their combination of duty and fear. The second time, the conservatory door bore a new set of scratches low to the ground, as if a temper had been taken out on glass. Allaric said only, "Stay near the hearth after dusk," and Lenora, who had never been good at staying near anything for long, obeyed. The conservatory beckoned by day. It was a garden of fixed summer, where vines embroidered lattice and lemons hung like small suns. Lenora went there to be alone with the bees and the small rapture of not being observed. She carried a book and sometimes did not read a word. On a pale afternoon, she found someone else had a claim to it. A woman stood by the fig tree, pinching the tips of the leaves as though they had misbehaved. She wore widow's weeds like a queen wears her crown, in a way that turned fabric into threat. "Forgive me," Lenora said. "I thought," Agnes said. "The house belongs to the living, even when it does not," the woman said. Her voice had the scratch of velvet turned wrong side out. She turned. It was the portrait's face, only warmer, livelier, and therefore more dangerous. "You must be the charity case." "I am Lenora," Lenora said, her spine doing that thing it did when someone tried to bend it. "You are." Sable Gray smiled, and in that smile, Lenora saw how a boy might become a man who mistook hunger for love. "Alive," she said, "more than the house would prefer. Call me Lady Gray, for that is what I am, and do not mistake the law's opinion on my death for my own. Thornfell and I have an agreement. My son forgets it because he likes the way forgetting tastes." "You're not," Lenora began, then realized how useless that word is in a place where doors open 10 years after they are shut. "Does Allaric know you are here?" "Allaric knows everything," Sable said. "He is his father's son in that, at least. My condolences on your pending nuptials. We buried his father with his secrets. We could not bury his son in his sense. You'll be good for something, I expect. A pact is a pact. What pact? But Sable had the gift of retreat. She moved through a wash of light and was gone, and only the fig knew where. Lenora stood among leaves that smelled of milk and green and told herself she had not just spoken to the dead and been mocked for being alive. She went straight to the library and didn't bother announcing herself. "Your mother is in the conservatory," she told Allaric, and did not sit. He closed his eyes briefly, as if someone had thrown grit into them. "Of course she is," he said. "She loved figs. I had forgotten." "She is, Allaric, she isn't dead." "She is something worse. She is committed," he said, the words so dry they might have burned a little. He gestured to a chair, and when she did not take it, he took hers instead and looked up at her like a knight ready to be tried. "I owe you truth. It is not pretty. I will not make it pretty for your sake, because I will not insult you. Thornfell stands on a cliff that was once a forest. My family made a home with the wolves and then tried to make the wolves obey. There was love and there was war, and sometimes there were both at once. A curse was laid in that garden of mistakes. The words are not important. The terms are, each generation, one of us is given the means to keep the house and the pack together. That gift always looks like a woman. Sometimes she is a lord's bride, sometimes a lord's ruin." "And me?" Lenora asked, though her locket had already answered. "You are both," he said. "If you love me, you break a chain. If you do not, you forge one. The choice is yours. That is the curse's cruelty and its mercy." "And your mother?" "She loved her power more than she loved anything that breathed," he said without heat. "She kept the pack bound by fear and by favors only she could grant. My father died too early to untie what she had tightened. I have tried. She will not have this marriage, not because she minds the girl. She has always liked pretty, serious girls. She used to collect them like paperweights, but because she minds any covenant she cannot control." Rage flickered through Lenora and cooled into purpose. "So she sends wolves to beat the windows and test the doors until I run," she said. "It is a poor strategy. I have learned to hold on to things." Allaric's hand twitched, as if it wanted something that belonged to the air between them. "I know," he said. "I have seen you do it. The first snow on the moor looked like lost feathers. Thornfell put on winter like a cloak. The dress was finished, and Agnes cried when she saw Lenora in it and slapped her own face because crying was untidy. You look like a vow, she said. On the day chosen, a sickle moon rose early, pale and hungry. The house filled with candlelight, as if the sun had fallen and shattered into 1,000 small flames. A priest arrived who looked like a man who had explained too many miracles to too many men. The staff stood with the dignity of those who know work is holy when done with hands that love the hands they work for. Allaric waited at the front of the chapel, which had once been a conservatory for souls. His winter forest eyes did not leave Lenora when she entered, and something in her that had not yet been named stood up and said, "Yes, I serve you, and meant by you nothing so simple as a man, but everything so complicated as a life." The wind found a gap around the chapel door and sang its cold song through it. The priest opened his book, and the candles listed as if ships in a sudden squall. Lenora's locket lay warm between her breasts. She was not afraid. The door blew inward, as if it had decided it belonged to the night after all. They came like a weather. 4, 6, 8. Lenora could not count them all because they were motion, not number. A gray-black harvest of muscle and breath and eyes that held a thinking ferocity that was not quite human and not human. Servants shouted, brandished iron, lifted candles that flared like little suns. The priest made a sign in the air and discovered that lines can mean less than teeth. Allaric was moving before anyone could translate the moment. His coat hit the flagstones, his shirt ripped, not by hand. For a heartbeat, he was two creatures layered, a man with his scar and his mouth, and something taller when it stood on 4 legs. something that was a history of winter and hunger and a promise given at the beginning of stories. The change made a sound. Bones reimagined themselves. Skin remembered fur. His eyes, oh God, his eyes, stayed the same. Lenora stepped toward him without knowing she had done so. A paw hit the stone where she had been. Agnes yanked her back hard enough to bruise. "No," Agnes said, and the one word was love and command and prayer. The fight drew itself like an ink painting. Fast lines, splashes, pauses where breath steamed and time snatched a rest. Allaric moved like a thing that had practiced being itself, like a river-cutting stone in the shape of a name it had carried for centuries. He met the first wolf at the aisle, the second at the steps, the third at the altar itself. Blood made a color on the black stone like spilled wine. A wolf leaped for Lenora and met the leg of a pew with its ribs instead. Agnes swung a poker with the grace of a woman who had once swung a scythe. The priest shouted something in Latin that might have been useful for a different myth. "Stop!" Lenora cried, and the sound surprised her with its authority. For a heartbeat, the motion in the room hiccuped. Sable Gray stood in the doorway now too, as if the night had decided to wear her to dinner. Her smile was the dangerous one, the one that offered favors and counted debts. "Put the toys away," she said, and the wolves froze the way wolves freeze when the moon speaks directly to the blood. "My son must not forget who gives him his nights. He knows," Lenora said. She did not know she would speak until she heard it. She felt the locket against her, as if it had grown a heartbeat. He also knows who gives him his mornings. Sable's gaze slid to her. It was like standing in a cold river. "Ah," she said, "the cure and the curse. Girl, no one keeps a promise to a house, not even a house. You think marrying a man makes you mistress of the things that eat him? You will learn." "I already have," Lenora said, and opened the locket. The pressed sprig was nothing, a herbarium relic, but its scent lifted like a winter song, the sharpness of aconite, the iron-bright ghost of a meadow that once grew behind some cottage where a woman pressed this sprig and kissed a girl goodnight. Sable's nostrils flared, involuntary, ugly. The wolves shifted, a concert of discomfort, as if some subtle itch had traveled their spines. "Wolfsbane," Sable said. "How quaint." "Not a poison," Lenora said softly. "A promise. Mother to daughter to daughter to girl, set on a cliff to make a choice." She didn't know how she knew the words. Perhaps Saint Isolde's lullabies had been planted like keys. She began to sing. It was not a pretty song. It had been made useful before it had been made beautiful. It told the moon a story about hunger, and then it told hunger a story about being seen. It spoke to blood the way one speaks to a scared animal, firm, kind, unafraid. Lenora did not raise her voice. The song went under the ears, under the skin. The wolves' hackles lowered with the inevitability of tide. One whined, not in pain, but in confusion. Allaric's gray eyes, no, his gray eyes, found hers, and he stilled as if she had put her hand on his heart. Sable hissed. "You think love undoes law?" "I think love writes better law," Lenora said. She moved down the aisle. Agnes led her, reluctantly, slowly, with the wail of a kettle in her throat that did not come out as sound. Lenora's dress whispered secrets to the stone. She walked to the wolf that was a man she had chosen before knowing what he was, and she held out her bleeding palm where the locket had cut her earlier. "Allaric," she said. She did not use "my lord." The wolf lowered his head, a gesture so humble its power made her knees weak. He touched his tongue to her blood and shuddered as if struck. The change came with a violence that made the earlier one look like a courtesy. He rose, a man again, naked as truth, blood on his mouth that was not hers, breath a storm. The chapel held its breath the way a theater does when the audience leans forward at once. "Mother," he said, and his voice did not belong to this room. It belonged to a forest clearing where decisions are made. "The house is mine, the pack is mine, The girl is mine because she chooses me, not because you do, and because she has chosen me, I choose the rest." Sable's face did something it had not done since she had been a bride. It showed uncertainty. It was terrible, and therefore lovely. "You would break with me," she said, and a crack passed through the "we" of that sentence like frost through water. "I would break your grip," he said, no louder than before. She lifted her hand. Wolves moved. Allaric stepped into them, and the fight was fight again. The chapel could not contain such a clash. It spilled. It streaked down corridors and made music of breaking. It flung itself into the courtyard, where snow had begun to fall in serious numbers, and found there the sea wind and the moon, which had risen now like a coin someone had bitten to test. Men became wolves, and wolves became men, and sometimes men became neither, choosing to be cowards for a night and pay for it in other currency later. Lenora followed because the song would not be left behind, because something in her had been called, because she had never been good at staying near the hearth when the world required otherwise. The east wing's locked doors hung ajar, keys still in their mouths like insults. The wolves who fought for Sable wore leather collars that stank of oil and something chemical, oaths that were not made with breath and therefore did not break easily. The ones who fought with Allaric bled without complaint and pressed their sides to his when they could. Their eyes were not gentle, but they were honest. Lenora saw the stable boy with hair like a sandstorm take a bite that would scar and laugh anyway because he had found where he belonged, and she loved him for it with a fierceness that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with home. Snow turned red, and then pink, and then clean again where it drifted over old stains. Sable moved through the chaos like a queen on campaign, touching a shoulder here, a muzzle there, and as she touched, those she touched seemed to grow heavier, as if gravity loved them more. Lenora realized what the collars were, promises made to a woman who could still make a certain part of the moon listen. "Agnes!" Lenora shouted, and the woman was there because Agnes was always where she was needed. The chapel mirror. "Smash it?" Agnes asked hopefully. She had the poker. "Bring it," Lenora said. "We'll save the smashing for later." Agnes vanished and returned with 2 footmen staggering under the weight of a gilt-framed mirror that had hung behind the altar for 100 years and held 100 seasons of faces in its silver. Lenora had not known she would say what she said until she said it. "Sable Gray," she called. "Look." Sable turned. It is a human thing, the urge to witness one's own fear. The mirror offered her Sable Gray and the wolves, the snow, and the beautiful, terrible sun, and it offered her something else under that. A woman not born to power who had loved the feeling of it so much she had married a house and then tried to devour it. Sable's pupils widened, a predator's calculation, and then for an instant, the calculation cracked to reveal loneliness behind it, like a hearth behind a wall. Lenora seized that instant and lifted her locket hand. "I release what was bound by fear," she said, and prayed she was quoting the right lullaby line and not the one about soup and bread. Blood hit silver. The mirror hiccuped. A ripple went through the image, as if a cold wind blew inside the glass. Every collar in the courtyard snapped like a gunshot. 100 small sounds made one large silence, the kind that comes when a spell realizes it has overstayed its welcome. The wolves staggered, as if doors inside them had opened to new rooms they had once known and then had walled up. Some ran, not cowardice, but relief. Some fell and rose men, confused, weeping without tears because they had forgotten how. Sable's face went white, not pale, a color that exists only when one has lost and knows it. "You taught the house to love you instead of itself," Lenora said, still shaking with the song that had moved through her. "We loved you because you were here, Sable. You stayed because we loved you. That is over." Sable lifted her hand to strike, not Lenora, but the night. Allaric was already there. They met like a history meeting, its proof. He did not shift. He did not need to. He caught her wrist the way a man catches a falling blade and held it. "Mother," he said, and the word was forgiveness and verdict both. Rest. It was not death that took Sable. It was the thing that comes to rulers when their rule is not needed. She looked suddenly so tired that Lenora felt a human pity that complicated everything. Sable looked at the house, at the sea, at the son she had tried to make into a thing she could keep, at the girl who would not be kept by anything but love, and then her eyes lost their cleverness. She turned, not to Lenora, not to Allaric, but to the cliff's edge where Thornfell's first lord had once stood and said, "Build." She walked toward it as though toward a bed left turned down. Snow rose in veils. When the veil fell, she was not there. No cheer rose. Relief is not festive when it costs so much. The wolves, those who were wolves, and those who had discovered they were men, and those who had discovered they were women, moved slowly now, cleaning their wounds with the carefulness of children who are going to be scolded into gentleness and don't mind. Agnes leaned on her poker like a queen on a scepter and sobbed once like a storm breaking over a field, and then set her jaw. Allaric looked at Lenora the way a man looks at bread after a famine. He took a step and then checked himself as if she were made of finer glass than the mirror. "I am," he began, which is how men begin to apologize when they have made the mistake of thinking a woman will want words more than proof. "You are," Lenora said. She went to him because she had not been made to wait for what she wanted. She put her hand, this time the uncut one, against his face. His stubble rasped her palm, and his breath was a prayer he had not known he knew. "We finished a battle," she said. "We can begin our vow." Winter kept its appointment. The chapel was reset with a competence that looked like magic and was actually women with strong arms. The priest dried his book. The footman hauled the mirror back and leaned it against the wall, cracked now and more honest for it. Lenora washed her hands in lemon water in the conservatory while the bees slept in their winter stupor. Agnes brushed her hair and did it roughly so as not to cry. "You are your mother's daughter," Agnes said, "and also your own." "Was my mother?" "A girl who sang to wolves and was loved by one," Agnes said simply. "She made you a promise and gave you the means to keep it. That is mothering." Lenora went to the chapel and found Allaric waiting not as a wolf or a lord, but as a man who had chosen to be loved more than obeyed. The air smelled of beeswax and snow. The candles were not so proud now, their flames smaller, steadier. The priest opened his book. The vows were old, their words fit her mouth. When the time came for rings, Allaric set the velvet box on the rail and opened it. Inside, on black satin, lay a band of iron braided with silver. "Thornfell taught me to wear iron to stop the wrong things," he said. "I will wear it to keep the right ones, if you will have me." "I will," she said, and the words went through her like a key. When he slid the ring on her finger, something in the house exhaled. The sea lifted and settled. The hound in the library put its head back down. A door in the east wing, somewhere, finally shut. It did not lock. It did not need to. They walked out into a courtyard being remade by snowfall. The staff stood in a half-circle that could be mistaken for a family by anyone who had never had one and envied it. The stable boy saluted with his cap. The cook wept freely and blamed the onions she held. The gardener slipped a lemon into Lenora's hand, as if to remind her summer could be kept even in winter if held near enough to the heart. Allaric lifted his face to the sky, and the flakes caught in his lashes and did not melt at once. "Look," he said softly. Across the moor, forms moved. Wolves, yes, and men, yes, and something else that the human eye could not translate into names. Wildness in motion, not an enemy, not quite a friend, a neighbor in the way weather is a neighbor. They did not come to the walls. They did not need to. One stopped at the ridge where the road dipped and turned its head. It was the old gray, the sentinel she had seen through her window that first night. It watched, And then it did the oddest thing. It bowed. Lenora bowed back because no one had taught her not to bow to the things that kept her safe. She slid her hand into Allaric's because she had decided to make a habit of it. "You smell like pine and smoke," she said. "And you smell like lemons and a winter kitchen," he said, and smiled in a way that made her want to preserve the moment in glass. They did not speak of happily ever after because they did not believe in endings. They believed in mornings. In the one that came next, Lenora wrote to St. Isolde's and asked Agnes to take the letter, which meant it would arrive with more authority than the post could provide. She requested better fires for winter, more butter for bread, books for the girls not about saints but about women who built houses on cliffs and kept them. She sent a purse heavy enough to make a bell sound when set on a desk. "Tell the girls we will have them here for summer if they like," she told Agnes. "They can run the moor and learn the kitchen and be bored by a library bigger than their sorrow." "And learn to count to 60, Agnes said dryly. "And learn when to stop at 20 and run for help," Lenora countered, and they smiled at each other with a knowledge that made words unnecessary. The house changed slowly, as houses do. The east wing opened and found its light again. The piano was tuned and taught to play songs that did not always end in minor. Wolves still sang from the hills, but the song was patrol now, not punishment. On clear nights, Allaric ran the boundary because some rituals you keep, not because you must, but because they remind you who you are. Sometimes he went alone. Sometimes Lenora went with him, wrapped in furs, her breath a small comet, and learned the stars by his names for them. Once, in spring, they returned to find the conservatory full of children tugging lemons from branches and shouting in the way people shout when joy is too big for the body. The girls from St. Isolde's had arrived. Agnes stood with her arms folded and her mouth badly hiding its smile. Lenora watched a girl with ink on her fingers and a hole in her hem stare at the sea as if it were a book she had not yet learned to read, and she felt something inside her settle into the shape of a promise kept. That night, when the house slept, the chapel's cracked mirror caught moonlight and made of it a path. Sable Gray's portrait watched from the library, her expression softened by dust. Lenora paused before it with a candle that steadied itself bravely, though a draft tried it. "I will keep what you loved," she told the painted woman who had made love a weapon and then learned it could be a cure. "But I will not keep how you kept it." The painted eyes did not blink. The candle guttered. Somewhere a wolf called and was answered. Lenora went upstairs to where Allaric slept with one arm across the empty space as if to save it for her. She slid into that space, and he did not wake fully, only breathed her name as though prayer and name were the same mouthful. When storms came, they counted to 60 and lit the candle, and sometimes did neither and lay awake in the dark, listening to Thornfell remember itself. When peace came, they did not throw a feast as if to frighten it. They set an extra place at table and let it sit down like family. When sorrow came, as sorrow always does, arriving with the ordinary but sitting at the head of the table, they fed it and asked it to sing, and discovered it had a good voice. Never once did Lenora forget the feeling of the window glass cold against her palm and eyes looking back through winter. She did not stop visiting the conservatory, where figs took too long to ripen and tasted therefore like patience. She kept the locket and wore it empty, or perhaps not empty, but full of air that had once touched a sprig. She taught the girls how to press plants without losing their green. She taught them when to hold a door and when to bar it. She taught them that home is made not of walls, but of promises kept by people who mean to keep them. On a summer night when the bees were loud, she and Allaric stood on the cliff where the First Lord had said, "Build," and the sea threw handfuls of itself upward, and the stars made a game of being counted and losing. "We could have burnt it down," Allaric said, not wistful, merely noting the road not taken. "We could have gone inland and made a little house somewhere with a little wood and a little quiet." "We could have," Lenora said. "But who would have counted to 60 here if not us? He kissed her then, like a man who tastes both rescue and recognition. Somewhere a wolf barked once, twice approval. "My lord?" she teased when they broke apart. "My Lenora," he corrected, and that was the title she kept. Autumn returned, as it always does in places that take the seasons seriously. The moor breathed fog, the road ribboned black and wet. A coach labored up the hill with two new girls from St. Isolde's, their noses pressed to the glass, their futures unscripted. Lenora stood in the doorway framed by lamplight that turned the night to honey and waited, Agnes beside her, Allaric behind with the patient gravity of a man who had learned that all arrivals are holy. "Welcome to Thornfell," Lenora said when the door opened. She took a small, cold hand in hers. "Come in. There are rules you will break and rules you will keep, and you will learn which is which. If you hear howling, count to 60 before you light a candle. If you are afraid, count to 20 and come find me." "Will there be wolves?" one of the girls asked, not afraid, merely greedy for the truth. "Yes," Lenora said, and the wind blew in and brought the sea with it, and the house made its pleased old bones sound, and mornings after. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel grow. Thanks for watching.